Alright guys, so time is now for another entry in our Community Cast series. In this match, we're going to have a showdown between the Dwarves, who are going to be led by Yumais, and the Dark Elves, who are going to be helmed by Rigson. So without further ado, let's jump right into this match and have some fun. So as far as the build goes for the Dawi, it looks like they're going to have a very ranger-heavy army. So they have one part of their force right here, which is going to be mainly Longbeards, a couple groups of Thunders, which of course are very good against Dark Elves. They're often going to have Hargoneth Executioners, and the Dark Elves do have a fair amount of armor across their entire roster. So having a couple groups of Thunders, I think, is pretty damn important. And here's the Rune Lord. So the Rune Lord, as far as like competitive play goes, and this is one of my biggest issues with the Dwarfs in general, the Rune Lord is probably one of the only competitive picks. I mean, if you're going to be using the standard Dwarf Lord just for, going cheap and wide, that makes sense. But aside from that, most of the other Dwarf Lords just aren't that good in competitive play. I mean, if they're able to sit in their target and just fight and go fisticuffs, they're going to be pretty strong. But for the most part, they're just slow, they just get kited, and they suffer a lot of the problems that, typical Footlords do. But that's the reason why the Rune Lord's pretty good, because he's going to guarantee you get value, right? Like, you look at a Lord like Malekith, he has Gaze of Malice, he has magic, he has a ton of mobility. Wurzog, for example, is another really cool Lord who just has so much intrinsic value. So even if, regardless of the matchup, Wurzog is always going to be pretty damn good, right? Because of the Bonewood Staff and his magic. And it just seems like most of the Dwarf Lords, aside from the Rune Lords, maybe Grombrindle with like the Smoke Bomb, I guess that's kind of an AoE slow, that's pretty good. It just seems like, a lot of their Lords are a little bit lackluster. But I mean, and there are some of my favorite Lords in terms of thematics, but I just definitely feel like Foot Lords in general, you can look at Lords like Sigvald, and I mean, they can be used in extremely niche circumstances simply as like a survival Lord, but for the most part, I definitely think that Foot Lords need a little bit of help in terms of their abilities. So yeah, Rune Lord here, a very good choice. The Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, no, just regular one going down there. I think the Master is going to be going down on the Hargoneth Executioners. In the back, he does have a cannon, so he has a cannon. He has 3 Rangers here in the back, or actually looks like it's 2. They're going to be guarded by Dragonback Slayers, 1 group of Dwarf Warriors, and then a massive Vanguard force. So this is going to be 2 Miners with Blasting Charges, a couple Rangers, Althar's Raiders, Bugman's Rangers in the back. That's pretty much it, so very, very cool Dawi force. For the Dark Elves, he does have a combination of the Sisters of Slaughter, which are pretty good against Dwarves. You wouldn't think so because their armor piercing is low, but they're actually really good against like Dwarven infantry. They have really high melee defense. They can really grind it out in a long fight, and they also do have poison. It's one of those things that just seems a little bit odd, but yeah, they can actually be good, and they do have bronze shields. It's got Blackheart Corsairs, a very heavy core of the Hargoneth Executioners, including the Blades of the Blood Queen, which are very, very nasty against the Dawi if they're able to close the distance. And Blackheart Corsairs here, Sisters on the far side, Malekith on his Lizard Limo, as Dob Plays puts it, and it does have the Power of Darkness and the Soul Stealer, which is pretty standard stuff. And in the back, he does have 1 Reaper Bolt Thrower. So maybe he just brought the Bolt Thrower to like snipe enemy artillery, and the Spray Fire mode isn't bad against like Rangers. So guys, let's get this show on the road. So the Dark Elves are going to be advancing, major gunfire just tearing into these Sisters right here. Rune of Wrath and Ruin slowing them, so that's a pretty good start. And you can see the Dwarves did not bring too many armor-piercing infantry. So in terms of the infantry game, they are going to struggle a little bit against the Hargoneth Executioners, but I have a feeling he's not going to really give them a fair fight, right? Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin going down on these ones from the Rune Lord. The other 2 Hargoneth Executioners are actually being kited by Longbeards, which is something you don't see every day. 26 speed on these guys compared to the 31, so they will eventually be caught. But the Hargoneth Executioners chasing the Longbeards is kind of opening them up to take a little bit of fire here from the Thunders, but a beautiful flank here from the Dark Elves. So the Dark Elves had a Vanguard over here in the Forest of Dark Riders. There was 2 of them. I did miss them initially, but yeah, they're able to get in there and do some pretty good work against these Rangers. At the very least, shut them down temporarily. But the thing about Rangers is they're not quite as strong as Bugman's Rangers, but they're really not pushovers. They do have, 26 melee defense, 28 weapon strength. They should be able to put up an okay fight against the Dark Riders. But over here, the Dragonback Slayers easily missed by these Dark Riders, and they're just, man, the Dragonback Slayers are cutting these guys to pieces. Absolute slaughter here in the back line. And it looks like the Dwarven Cannon is still online and still doing its thing. But if we look at the main fight, the Dark Elves obviously collapsed from this flank, and the kiting is, going relatively well. The Thunders are still running, but it looks like the Hargoneth Executioners might be able to catch them. But what's really cool is he marked them by Althar, which is going to lower their missile resist and their armor, putting them down to 70 armor. And now this massive firing line of Rangers and Althar's Raiders are probably going to be able to tear them to pieces. So the Dwarves with a very kite-centric game, kind of pulling the Dark Elves into the open field and just using all their tools to kind of cut them down. So Hargoneth Executioner is about to close the distance here, but the Slayers are going to be charging in as well. And the Marked by Althar lowering their armor is actually going to greatly increase the DPS of these Dragonback Slayers against them. And man, look at that crossfire on those guys, just absolutely melting them. In the back line, though, it looks like the Dark Riders are still continuing to cause a little bit of problems. Some minor problems here for the Dwarves, but the Rangers are pretty stalwart. They're able to hold, but he might be able to get the Dark Riders up and around the back and shut down these cannons. And like we had guessed, the Reaper Bolt Thrower is being used to snipe out that cannon crew in the back. The Rune Lord here is in a little bit of a dangerous situation. He does get caught up by the Hargoneth Executioners. You can see Power of Darkness going down from Malekith. We got to find out where Malekith is. He's been sneaky this whole game. But yeah, in the distance, Malekith is basically just harassing the Vanguard force. He's using his Lizard Limo to run these guys down. And yeah, the chariots are always pretty good. I mean, they're basically the bane of dwarves. Like when you're playing Chaos and Beastmen, oh man, those Razor Gore chariots and just, oh, it's so nasty. But anyways, Malekith continuing to ride about. The balance of power relatively in the favor of the dwarves, like hiding and kind of pulling the Dark Elves through the gunfire, like having flanks pull back, which forces the Dark Elves to overextend and allows for a little bit more firing. And also the untraditional formation from the dwarves, like kind of the Dark Elves committed most of their force to this frontal engagement. And from there, the Rangers and other troops were able to really come around the flank and do some pretty good damage. But Malekith's going to be riding through right now. He definitely has some potential to do some huge backline damage. As far as the Slayers go, I think the Slayers took massive casualties fighting in the front line. They got sent in here. Yeah, Dragonback Slayers still have 39 models and going to be pretty good at holding these guys in place. And yeah, I mean, Slayers at the very least are going to be able to hold them in place and allow your guns and bows to do more work. Over here, you can see that the Rune Lord is in a little bit of a dangerous situation. It looks like he's going to get the Soul Stealer on him. Yeah, Soul Stealer going down from Malekith. The Lizard Limo is going to be riding into the Rangers, and it looks like some Blackheart Corsairs have gotten into the back line. And Blackheart Corsairs are going to really, really shine against both Slayers because of their armor, and they have that bonus for infantry against Rangers and other troops. So they're pretty, decent little niche here in the back line. Dragonback Slayers, however, just massive combat stats regardless, 45, and what is their melee defense? 44 isn't bad, I guess. They're going to be chasing, potentially applying slows to Malekith, but it looks like Malekith might be trying to go after the Rune Lord, which is a bold strategy. I mean, even though he looks really buttered up right now, chariots in general aren't the best at taking out like single target entities, so Malekith's going to be trying. He has 113 leadership right now because of the Murderous Mastery, which is crazy. But the problem with going after the Rune Lord is it's going to open up these Thunders and the cannons. You can see the cannons turning about face to shoot Malekith. The Thunders are about to line up their sights, and he's probably going to be taking some heavy damage right now. So you can see that firepower coming in, doing a little bit of poking. He actually does pretty much break the Rune Lord, but the Rune Lord might stabilize. No, it looks like he's going to break, but I don't think Malekith can afford to chase him. So Malekith slams into the back of these Thunders, but he's going to be greeted by a bunch of angry dwarfs. So the Dragonback Slayers just bro charging in there with their bro hawks. Karate kicks coming in. Nothing is quite as glorious as the Slayer jump kicks. That's been like one of my favorite things ever since game one. But Malekith going on his one-wheeled, I never noticed, they actually have like one wheel in the back, and that's pretty funny, but he's going to be going in there. But hordes of angry dwarves are chasing him down, and the Ranger Vanguard doing pretty good. I mean, they're all really low on ammunition for the most part, except these ones, so they've been able to just kind of, unleash their full firepower here on the Blackheart Corsairs. And the Blades of the Blood Queen here are going to get marched by Althar, which is going to make them just absolutely a buttered up croissant here for the Rangers and other low, armor-piercing units. Yeah, the Mark of Althar, I never really thought about its synergy with like using it with like infantry just to lower armor. I mean, obviously it's a little bit better with missile units, but nonetheless, it definitely helps like Dwarf Warriors and Longbeards without great weapons fight against these armored units. In the back, Malekith still riding about, doing a pretty good job. He does ride into the cannons here, but he does break the last cannon, so Malekith is causing a lot of problems here for the Dwarves. Dragonback Slayers and the other Dawi are going to be hunting those guys down. And in the back, it looks like there is a bit of a stabilization from the Dark Elves back here. The Sisters of Slaughter are able to push off the Miners with some Blackheart Corsairs, but really, I just don't think the Dark Elves have quite enough left. These Harkonneth Executioners have really been dragged through the mud. Master Runes of Wrath and Ruin, Runes of Wrath and Ruin have really cut those guys to pieces, but the Dawi, I think, lost both Rune Lords. I think the main Rune Lord went, and then the Rune Smith got taken out as well by a group of Harkonneth Executioners, so it really hasn't been too bad for the Dark Elves here. But Malekith right now definitely in a relatively bad situation. He's trapped down by the Dragonback Slayers, putting his speed down to 43, which is only 3 faster than the Dragonback Slayers, which is pretty funny, but yeah, they're probably going to be able to finish him off here. The Blades of the Blood Queen, of course, very elite, are going to be fighting to the bitter end. They do have 46 leadership. They're going to be meeting the Altar's Raiders in head-to-head combat, but the Altar's Raiders have great weapons in melee. Might be able to finish them off. 423 here versus 1,000 and, 972, give or take. But yeah, it looks like the Blades of the Blood Queen might be able to actually pull this out. Man, those guys are just straight-up lawnmowers. But the Altar's Raiders going out. Some of them joining the Halls of the Ancestors, but definitely some good stuff there. You can see the Ranger Vanguard is going to be cleaning up the reinforcing Dark Elves. That's pretty much going to be all she wrote. Malekith in the back line is going to be doing all that he can. You can see, but the Dawi Thunders, I mean, every direction he chases, he's being shot from a different angle. And that statement I just made is like a true articulation of how the Dwarves have to be played in competitive play. You really just have to like have crossfire. You can't have like traditional lines. You have to have onions, or like, when one missile unit's being chased, there has to be like another line of missile units shooting at them as well. It's just really the core of Dawi play. So right here, Malekith is going to be charging into these guys. And I think there's some Dark Elves coming back. The bounce power actually did teeter for a moment there, but I don't think he's going to be able to do a whole lot. Maybe he's going. Malekith's going on his Lizard Limo, but yeah, that's going to be all she wrote. So very well played to both players. I really like that tactic, and I mean, normally I like to bring armor piercing myself against the Dark Elves. Like typically I'll bring a couple Miners for chaff and a couple Dwarf Warriors to deal with like, the Sisters of Slaughters or Witch Elves, that kind of stuff. Even though they lose, they like hold them for a long time. And then from there I get like Longbeards with great weapons, but this build works pretty well. I mean, marked with Altar, perpetually using that on the heavily armored targets to kind of butter them up. The Rune Magic and, the Thunder Fire was able to do massive amounts of damage. And it was a really, really cool original build for sure. It just kind of makes me sad. Like I said earlier, I just wish that the other Dwarf Lords could be more competitive. I find that whenever I go in with like an Ungrim Iron Fist or, High King Thorgrim or any of those guys, I'm just at a massive disadvantage. I mean, there's so much more that lords from other factions can do, right? Like Thorgrim, he can waddle into a formation, he can give a melee attack buff, but like, you pay so much gold for the Great Book of Grudges, right? But then someone like Wurzog is going to get Bonewood Staff, which is just like gives 13 melee attack to the whole army, like the entire game. Whereas like then the Book of Grudges just gives like 9 melee attack to in a pitiful radius. I feel like, dwarves are not a weak faction overall. I feel like the weakness of some of their lords is made up for by like, their sturdiness, their good leadership, their firepower, and a bunch of other variables. But I still just wish that dwarf lords had like. And foot lords in general, I'm not just saying for the dwarves. If there's like a lord that can only be brought on foot, I feel like they should have some like really powerful abilities. And Grimgor is kind of in the same department, right? Like he should have an improved wad that makes him worth bringing. High King Thorgrim should have something that he can. He has the High King buff and a couple other things like that, but maybe something that just makes him very, very impactful. Same with like Ungrim. Ungrim has the Red Ruin, which really isn't that good because anytime like you're playing against a competent player, they see the Red Ruin get popped, they're simply going to run away. And dwarves don't really have enough mass, like a high mass. Like, you can use like gyrocopters and it's really haggard, but they're going to be able to get away from you like, 75, 80% of the time. So I just feel like it's a little bit tricky for the Dawi. And I would definitely like to see that, be something that maybe gets rectified in the future. It's just tough. So anyways, very well played. That, like I said, Dwarf Tactic was really cool. Dark Elves had a solid army as well. The Blackheart Corsairs are a decent, kind of armored option against these type of infantry. Sisters, Harganeth Executioners, you had some harass in the back line. Malekith and the Limo did really well. And yeah, ultimately it was just a really solid game. So very well played to Yumais as well as Rigson. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this Dwarf versus Dark Elf grudge match, and we will see you guys next time. Take care.